Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce to you mind control educator, artist, writer, and author of her own book, MKUltra survivor and targeted individual, environmentalist, artist, business consultant, award-winning journalist, and activist working for the healing and human rights of mind control subjects, Jean Eisenhower. It's an honor to have Jean on the podcast, as it's been a while since she has spoken publicly about her testimony. Over a decade ago, Jean released a 3-minute video on YouTube about mind control that also alluded to her abuses, and as it went viral, she began to experience online and real-life sabotage for speaking out. Her incredible book, Rattlesnake Fire, a memoir of extra-dimensional experience, also details her testimony as a victim and survivor of trauma-based mind control, targeted individual warfare, and so much more. And I'm going to link that in the show notes for you guys to go check out and purchase. Jean was born into a multi-generational trauma-based mind control, Freemasonic, and military family, and was placed into MKUltra from birth. And it wouldn't be until she was 41 when she'd realized she was a program multiple who was leading a double life. And ever since, she's been piecing together the story of her life while combating the warfare involved with being a targeted individual and survivor. Jean is going to be talking about a myriad of topics today relating to her story, potentially including MKUltra, her family history, UFOs, Y2K, and electric mind control, and so much more. I'm honored to have Jean on the show and ask that you give her your full attention. We have so much to learn from survivors and about the insurmountable courage it takes to speak your truth in a world that hasn't been ready to hear it until now. Despite all the Satanists and controlled opposition who have tried to keep Jean from getting too loud, she is here today to shine a bright light on the darkness and shake the Luciferian kingdom with her powerful voice and testimony. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give you all just a quick reminder that if you're a survivor or whistleblower who wants to share your story on the podcast, or who wants to share any information privately with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. You can also support me on Substack at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. And you guys can find me on all different platforms that I'm going to have below, including BitChute, Rumble, iTunes, and Spotify. I really appreciate you all for your unwavering support and love of this show and every incredible guest we have the honor of listening to. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, creator, warrior, overcomer, voice for the voiceless, anti-child abuse activist, and hero for all children, survivors, and TIs, Jean Eisenhower. Jean, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Wow, Emma, thank you so much. That's a lot to live up to, that introduction you gave me. I sometimes feel so very weak and defeated. And that's their intention, is to make us feel weak and defeated and especially isolated. So I think that, yeah, so I'm a mind control subject. I was a mind control subject from birth, and that has made me a multiple personality. And the clinical term now is dissociative identity disorder. And I don't like that term. I think that they changed it in order to obscure the sensation that we all experience of having different personalities. And instead, they give it a name that just talks about the mechanism of switching between. But I think the different alters is a far more interesting thing that we can become aware of quickly and or eventually. And anyway, so I'm going to continue to use the word multiple personality instead of dissociative identity disorder. And there's different kinds of multiples. Some of us are very well designed by the government, and some multiples became multiples through some sort of trauma that was not overseen by quote unquote scientists. And so they are the ones who have movies made of them. So most everybody has been informed about multiples because of TV and movies. And that's only the most extreme. There are very quiet, well-functioning multiples in our nation. I absolutely believe that are nothing like the TV shows. So I'm one of those who I believe has always functioned very quietly. I never knew. I wasn't having any crazy events happen. But anyway, that's just a little bit of background. I'm multiple by virtue of having been made a mind control subject. And then another thing that has affected my life hugely is that I'm also on the autism or Asperger's spectrum. Asperger's is less acceptable term these days, but it doesn't sound as damaged or non-functioning as autistic, but they're now all considered the same. But that has definitely made me just a little bit different, a little bit having more difficulty interacting with kids when I was young. And it kind of complicated the whole effort of my coming to understand myself and heal. So those three things were always operating in my life. And finally, when I was born, I think almost all of us, when we're born, probably have our spiritual sensibilities, which are then socialized out of us. But I wasn't socialized. I was left in a room alone almost all of my childhood. My earliest childhood memories are of wishing I could leave my room. I was given an unending stream of books and crafts and toys to teach me and to teach me to focus. And that was it might have been part of what made me autistic, but it also gave me time to do whatever I wanted, like leave my body and go traveling and become very familiar with the spiritual dimensions. So while I have no memories of interacting with my parents as a child, I definitely was interacting with my cats, my dog, the trees in the backyard, the hedges, all living things. And I was going through a portal at night to go visit my family on the other realms, who was promising to take care of me and to help me and to watch and support me through what I was going through. So I had both this horrible experience of being mind controlled, and I also had spiritual support. And they were just weaving in and out of my life throughout. So with that sort of introduction, I'm going to start at the very beginning. My parents I'm not going to go into specifics about any family member, but the family lineage included the military, the Navy specifically, which has been known to be involved in mind control. Mormons, which I could build a case, have been involved in mind control, and they are the largest denomination in the CIA right now, or they always have been. So the CIA, which is known to do mind control, is a great part Mormon. And my great-grandfather was a 33rd degree Mason, so I did mention him, but he's long gone. And there was also a member of my family involved in Hollywood among child actors. And we know children in Hollywood, there's rumors about them being used sexually and abused and turned into mind control subjects. So I have all of that in my history. I was also born while my father was in school, and we were living on the campus of UC Davis married student housing. And so UC Davis, I lived there for the first 14 months of my life. And within that year, UC Davis began what's called the Human Ecology Project, which has also been in history related to mind control. So I was born onto the campus where they were doing this. And a lot of people now I don't have any memories in my life to suggest that I have anything to do with SRA, the satanic elements of it. I do believe that that is endemic in different churches, And I think it is also endemic in certain people within the CIA and the military. We actually, there's lots of little bits of knowledge that it exists in these entities. And but they love numbers and mystical associations like that. So I was born on July 7th, 1952, which is 7, 7, and 5, 2 adds up to 7. And I happened to be born on the full moon. And not just within the 24 hours of the full moon, I was born within 8 minutes of the full moon, which is 2/1000ths of a degree of that day, which is 1 degree of the year. So I was born way, very precisely on the full moon on a Monday in the middle of Moonchild, which is Cancer. So there are people who love this sort of, numerology and astrology. And it was on, and it had to do with, UC Davis, right when they were establishing their mind control. And later on, my pediatrician would be, I don't think he did not deliver me. There's a different doctor's name on my birth certificate, but I know that my doctor was the second cousin of Stuart Udall, who would soon become the Secretary of the Interior under Eisenhower in the Eisenhower administration. And he actually had a second home very near the home that we got after my 2 years of amnesia. So I believe that we had some connection to very high levels of the government, though that ended when I said something publicly that caused everything to shift in our lives. So anyway, the numbers and the moons and the lineage, it just seems right that I was born into mind control. Now, I think you said that I'd learned about my mind control in my 40s, but actually I only learned I was a multiple in my 40s. I was almost 50, just weeks away from my 50th birthday, when a friend who I'd had this real fast connection with, and we had done some good work together, she wrote me and says, Jean, I think I found some stuff that explains our stuff. She sent me a few links. I looked online and I found myself reading about mind control, MK Ultra, and SRA. And I was so shocked to read this. I knew I was a multiple. I knew I still had stuff I didn't understand, but what happened was I didn't believe it just because I read it. I believed it because I felt little children inside suddenly freaking out. Some were crying, some were having panic attacks. And then I hear another voice come in and say, it's okay, it's okay. This could be the beginning of our healing. And I just had a whole bunch of voices inside me. And I hadn't even really gotten in touch with my multiple alters yet. I'd known it as a theory, but since they didn't seem to be interfering with my life. And it was kind of upsetting to try to explore that idea. It just, blows my mind. So I just hadn't done the work. And now suddenly I have this whole bunch of children and teenagers and others inside me that are all reacting to this information coming in. I figured I had to learn something. So I went to the library at the U of A. Then I realized I needed to go to the medical library at the University of Arizona. And I sat down and I gave it a whole day where, actually I'm jumping back in time. I'm jumping back to when I found I was multiple and I read about multiples. And it sounded like it wasn't as bad as what all the movies and books had shown. By coincidence, I'd read Sybil a long time ago and I'd seen Three Faces of Eve. And I walked out of the library after having spent, 4 hours reading or skimming everything there. And there wasn't a whole lot there at the time. And it pretty much said a lot of multiple personalities are high functioning, some are geniuses, and many of them assert that they can use their different alters creatively and it does not interfere with their life. and that all they have to do is get in touch, understand them, and start working to work your system more efficiently. And I would say work it from within rather than having somebody else control them. Though there will always be the ones in the back that we didn't create, so I don't know how we can control them. Anyway, I'm going to jump back to my childhood again. My earliest memories are of being left alone. I was the oldest child, and so I was just always left alone, always wished I could leave my room. I learned how to crochet intricate doilies, even with little three-dimensional roses sitting in a circle around the edges before I was in kindergarten. That's what I was doing while I was looking out the window, wishing I could go to school. I just couldn't wait to be with kids. So when I did finally get to go to school, I didn't know how to socialize. I was incredibly shy. I was the child standing near the fence watching the other kids, and the teacher's aides would come up and tell me to go out and play. And I'd just be like, I don't know what that is. I just never knew how to interact with people. And I remember doing the same thing in third grade. I remember doing the same thing older. I got into theater, like a lot of autistic people actually do get into theater, because there's permission to be weird there in the theater. There really is. And I actually thrived in the theater. And then when I was 30 years old and I started my own business doing media work for nonprofit groups, I would go to networking meetings because that's what we're supposed to do. So I'd go out to lunch and I'd stand on the side, just like I did in kindergarten, watching everybody, wondering what in the world they're doing, and just like noticing and then role playing in my head how I'm going to copy what everyone else is doing, because this is not in any way a natural thing for me to do. I was just always the shy kid who was just ready to do any projects you wanted to do because I knew how to follow instructions. I knew how to obey. I also had a whole committee inside that could be really creative, and people were always loving my solutions to things. But just to hang around and talk and even just say what my name and my name of my business was really, really hard. I ended up taking a public speaking class. Actually, I recommended it to the networking group I was in, and they said, you organize that. And so I got somebody else to teach, and I went to class after class after class after class. And when I had exhausted everything I could learn with them, I then went to the library. So I've had to study as an adult how to talk, how to speak to people. And I finally developed some facility for that. Anyway, back to childhood. I was 3 or 4 years old when I said something to my mother that flew her into a rage. She dragged me into the bathroom. She knocked a bar of soap around in my mouth, and she was screaming something about, don't you ever say things like that. So I can only guess what I might have said. My guess is, don't you ever talk about what you don't like being done to you in the night. That's what I think I might have said. She just went ballistic, and I was already very, very afraid of her, and I would never do anything that she had told me not to do. And one of the things was to not bring a chair into the bathroom. So the bathroom sink was this high. So I'm guessing I was 3 or 4. I was short, and I couldn't spit the soap out of my mouth. I had chunks of soap stuck on my teeth. And I remember going into the kitchen to see whether she was done raging to get permission to move the chair to the sink to spit. And she gave me that. And I remember very well trying to get the soap off my teeth. So these were the sorts of things that I went through as a child. And shortly after, my mother began telling everybody, my aunt, my dad, random friends from the house, and my doctor, that I was crazy. That she was sure that I was crazy because this is her self-defense against the possibility that I might ever speak those words again, that something had been done to me in the night. She did not want that exposed publicly. And if it ever was, she would have already clued everyone in that I was crazy. So I heard that phrase a few times in my life, but it never, it came back to me in my 30s when I told a story about living in that student housing at UC Davis. I remembered it very well. Um, and I ended up drawing a floor plan of the apartment. I knew where a certain wavy glass was near the front door. I knew where the tile, the linoleum, and the carpet changed at an angle, and where the red chair was. And I drew all of this on the dining table at Christmas time with all the family around. And my mother looked at that and she went into a really strange, and now to me, sad, altered state. She was terrified. She said, "You couldn't remember that. You were 14 months old when we moved from there." And then she realized what she said. She had verified my floor plan was exactly correct. And she didn't want to verify that I had memories at 14 months. And so she got up from the table and she walked around, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck when she said these same words that she'd been saying my whole life. "I've always said you had an active imagination and you mixed up your dreams with memories." And like I said, the hair stood up on the back of my head. I realized she's been saying this to me my whole life. She never says it to the other kids. She only says it to me. And at that time, I felt incredibly sorry for her. I felt so sorry that she felt that she had something she had to hide her whole life. And now look at her. She's like in a trance state looking out the window because she couldn't sit here at the table with everybody. And I've just got to tell mom sometime, it's okay. My childhood was fine, because at that time in my 30s, I thought I'd had a beautiful childhood. I thought I'd grown up with great fortune, where I'd had lessons and everything I want, even things I didn't want. Lots of art lessons, singing lessons, piano lessons, dance lessons, typing lessons, copper enamel. I mean, I was given a lot of wonderful things in my childhood. And so, but mom is so worried about this. What in the world is she's seriously affected by the fact that I can remember. What in the world could she have done that would have been so bad? My mom's so nice. There was nothing that she could, that's what's going through my head. I could not understand it. But she had been telling everybody that I was untrustworthy for my whole life. I knew that. And I was sad about it because I knew my siblings believed it. And but mostly I felt sorry for my mom. I thought this was some indicator that mom was feeling inordinately guilty for something that I just couldn't believe could be anything too bad. But then later on, I'd realized probably both my parents are mind control subjects. Probably both of them had been hiding terrible, terrible trauma their whole lives, trying to act the epitome of normal, successful American professional people with a beautiful family. That's what my parents wanted. And we had a nice house. We always had, nice clothes, and it looked like a very fortunate family, but there were just deep, dark, hidden secrets. So every time I think of something in my childhood, I feel like I want to just kind of take it into the future and then jump back to the beginning again. I hope it makes it okay to follow. Okay. I did make that outline. I'm going to look at it to see whether there was something that really needs to be told first. Oh yeah.
While you're looking for that, could I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Were you related genealogically to President Eisenhower?
Yes. My father is second cousin to Dwight Eisenhower, which means they had the same grandfather, but just cousins as fathers. And oddly, Dwight was nominated to the presidency on my birthday. So I think those people in government also liked that number themselves. They would announce him for the presidency on July 7th, and then the Senate or the Republican Party would confirm him as the nominee on the 10th. So, yeah. So my parents were very, very proud of the Eisenhower name. But Eisenhower, I found out late in my adulthood that he used to visit my hometown. When I was 9, we moved to Paradise Valley, Arizona. And Dwight used to visit there with Mamie every single year, and I never knew that. So I'm thinking, well, Mom used to call us shirt tail relations. And I only realized later, oh, shirt tail doesn't mean just like far down the bottom. It's like the part you sit on. So I don't know whether, what exactly she was acknowledging there. But we never saw Dwight, but we are related. Late in my, let's see, how was it? Back in the 40s, in my 40s sometime, I had a flashback. I was in therapy because my son had just been diagnosed with cancer. My husband and I were divorcing. I was having a lot of trauma. So I went to a therapist, and I'd been practicing all weekend long what I was going to say. My son has cancer. My children are mad at me because we have to move. I'm getting divorced. I can't work. Well, this whole list. So I walk in the door, and I don't even sit down. I just run through my litany. Bam, 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 bam. All these things are happening to me. And then these other words came out my mouth. And I think I was sexually molested as a child. And I hadn't started dealing with this. I hadn't even had it cross my mind, but a fleeting second once. And so I told the therapist, no, this is not what I came here for. I'm here for everything else. I said, not this. And at the end of the therapy, he says, and as for that other thing, why don't you just ask your inner child sometime whether, there's anything that they want to tell you? And I'm like, inner child. I had never had any experience with my inner children. And I thought the mention of them was sort of an embarrassing thing. But one afternoon that week, I did have time. And so I said, okay, even though I think this is kind of hokey, any inner child want to tell me anything? And bam, an inner child wanted to talk. And I suddenly had this flashback of being, I'm guessing, a day or two old. And I'm on my back. I don't have the idea that I can roll over. I don't even have the idea that I have that much agency with my hands and legs. I feel like I'm very, very young, days old. And suddenly my diaper is removed. I have the sensation of a breeze. And then I'm on some rolling thing, and I'm rolling through a slightly darkened space into a lighter space. And then I'm feeling things happening between my legs. Oh. And then suddenly I'm feeling something so shocking that I leave my body, and I'm looking down. And I'm looking down on 3 men standing near a pedestal where my body is. And off on the side is my mother, who has slid down the wall behind her, and she's holding herself up from like literally falling all the way down. She's holding herself up, and she has her hand over her mouth, and she's rocking, and her eyes are all bugged out. So whatever had sent me out of my body had also strongly affected my mother. And I believe this was the very first mind control torture they had done to create an altar. And that's all I had in my memory, was that I left my body, and I believe that I was tortured within days of my birth.
Oh my gosh, so sorry.
Yeah.
Horrific.
And yeah. And the other thing was, it was not a stainless steel hospital room. This was a room that was all white. And I believe it was a religious setting. And we know that the Mormon Church has something called the Holy of Holies, where they do religious rituals. And there are some rumors about some really bad stuff that goes on, because Mormon theology, I learned a little bit about it, does have, and this has come up lately with the Lori Vallow case that's gone on, that the Mormons do actually believe that sometimes you should save somebody's soul by killing their body. And So who knows what goes on there? So they say that no police officers are allowed in there should anybody want to report a crime. Only Mormon police officers are allowed in the Holy of Holies. How they have that much power, I don't know. But I'm assuming that I must have been there. And that was the very beginning of my mind control. So I believe that the CIA works with the Mormon Church to lay the foundation of training. So my mother was probably trained in leave her alone and give her this series of things when she needs something to occupy her. And I don't know how I was tortured or tormented or scolded or whatever, but I didn't leave my room. When I was told not to leave my room, I didn't leave my room. I remember looking out the window, wishing I could leave my room. I remember hearing the adults around the corner. So I gained a very high level of language skills at a very young age, because that was the only way I had to connect to people, was listening to their language. And so I listened. I was always listening to the adults on, in the next room and listening to their language. When we moved from Merced, California to Paradise Valley, I came home from school one day and I saw Mormon missionaries talking to my mother in the living room, and I absolutely froze. I could not move. It was like my feet were locked to the ground and my legs would not move. And in my head, I said, they found us. I was so scared of Mormons. But my mom would take me to church now and then, and I never disobeyed. I always did whatever my mother asked. And so a few times, even though my mom wasn't even a Mormon anymore, she was never anything more than what she called a Jack Mormon, which means a fallen away Mormon, someone who doesn't go to church, which would make our family easier for them to decide to put in this program because they didn't respect us as fallen away Mormons. And I forget where I was going to go with that. Forgive me if I left a sentence unfinished, but
It's okay. It's
yeah.
like that's one of the interesting things about a lot of these church systems, Scientology, Mormonism. There's so much deception and evil that lurks in it at the higher levels, even Freemasonry. But yet these, these churches, these lodges, they're just out in the public eye parading and masquerading as if everything's good. And people don't do the research to sort of see like the origins of this, and I'm not saying everybody that goes into a Mormon church or every single Freemason is inherently evil, but it just shows like the lack of understanding of society that we even let this, be public, that we're not demanding that these establishments get taken down just because at the top it is so nefarious. So I appreciate you shining a light on that, because there's not a ton of survivors talking about, Mormonism and LDS. And I think it's a really important topic to talk about.
The woman you interviewed recently, whose name I don't remember, oh my goodness, now my brain just has stopped.
Teresa?
Oh, yeah, you mentioned Freemasonry.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've got Freemasonry, but I've learned that Mormons have their own version of the Masons. And it's very much like Freemasonry, but it just has a little bit of a Mormon twist on it. But they are also very active. So we've got secret societies throughout our life. And my belief is that they are all connected in a network, and they all work together whenever it's to their advantage. And the more powerful ones probably use and abuse the less powerful parts. And at the very, very bottom are your petty criminals who get picked up in the legal system. They get forced to do favors. We might call it, turning state's witness, but whatever. They find themselves also in this network of crime that includes petty criminals, the mafia, and the highest levels of government, and people hidden beyond those highest levels. That it's a huge, huge network that we live within, or not. Some people are just blissfully outside it, and wow, what a wonderful life you all have. But inside this, there's no such thing as human rights, civil rights, liberty, and justice for all. None of that. That doesn't exist for some of us. I just had one more story about the Mormon church. So I didn't have a whole lot. I didn't go there a lot, but I was dropped off occasionally. I remember one time being in something called Children's Church. And I remember leaving there and being like nearly out of my body with rage and saying, I'm never going back there again. Just, I'm never going back there again. Just so full of rage, but I don't remember what it was. What did they do to me? And then at age 13, when I had had almost nothing to do with the church, all of a sudden, mom decides I have to go to what was called MIA, the Mutual Something Association. And it was for young girls. And I hated it. You know, she'd drop me off in the afternoon. She'd pick me up a little bit later. In the wintertime, it would be after dark. And I'm supposed to be learning scriptures. I'm supposed to be learning to sew and crochet and embroider and do little crafty things and wear a bandolo the same way that Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts do with your badges on it. So there's a Mormon version of that. And I had the fewest things on. I had the fewest little fake diamonds on my, everybody else is better than me and standing up and they're so proud to recite scripture. And I'm just a complete failure. Hate it, hate it, hate it. And the last day that I went there, well, and we're there in the evenings, like I said, and in the winter it was dark and they turned on hardly any lights. So it was really spooky in there. And we're walking down these dark hallways. It was very, very spooky in the wintertime. And the very last lesson of the season was all about Satan and demons and how they were real and that we needed to not dismiss this. This was very serious, and they were going to tell us some stories. And so our Sunday school teacher had gone to BYU, and she's telling stories about how, especially if you're a good child, you Satan will really want to go after you. And so everybody at BYU, since they wanted to be such good Mormons, Satan was really after all of them. And she told stories about people being picked up and thrown against the wall by a demon, some invisible force just throwing someone against the wall, and how she herself had seen Satan's face in a beam of light in her bedroom and scared the daylights out of her. And so here it is, it's nighttime, it's dark, and we've just had this really scary lesson, and I finally released, and I go out to get in the car, and for the very first time, my mom says, oh, well, she always said, so what was your lesson about today? So I told her, and she finally said, do you want to keep going? And I said, no. And she said, okay. And that was the last time I ever went to a Mormon church. Anyway, that was just this little odd stream that I bounced in and out of throughout my life, and none of my memories about the Mormon church are good. Wow. So anyway, going back, way back in time, here's an odd one. When I was only 3 years old, I'm thinking, it could have been 4, could have been 5. We were outside. My parents were talking about daylight savings time, but something distracted them, and they saw what I believe now was a UFO. And they were just like, what is that? But they weren't afraid. I was completely terrified, and I don't know why. Why was I completely terrified when I saw a UFO? This is just a mystery I'm presenting, because later on I did have a lot of UFO experiences, but my very youngest was when I was very, very young, and it just involved a star. And for some reason, I think I had a previous experience that had flippin' terrified me. So when I entered puberty, I think my mind control handler, had some idea that he could make me be a better sexual slave if they could play some mind games on me around my sexuality. So my mom, I believe, I don't think she would do this to me on her own. I'm assuming that she was instructed. She refused to acknowledge that I could and should wear a bra. It was not fashionable at that time to show your nipples through your clothes. and I wanted a bra. And my mom just denied that I had any need for one. And one day I came home from school and all of my clothes were gone. And I'd had some very pretty clothes. And all my clothes are gone. And what is in my closet looks like they came from the Salvation Army. There were 3 very old-fashioned and super dingy blouses that had been white and were extremely sheer, and 3 skirts that were extremely ugly. They were like from the 40s or something. And so I had 3 40s skirts in the 60s and 3 sheer blouses. And I walked out to the kitchen and I asked my mom where my clothes went. And she said, you're growing out of them. They're gone. I have nothing else to wear to school but these 3 blouses and these 3 skirts. And I was terrified. And I just could not convince my mom that those blouses were sheer. She told me that I was wrong. They were not sheer. And so for 3 days, I went to school hunched over, trying to hide myself inside a blouse. And none of the kids would walk with me after lunch, toward the playground. I'm all by myself. And on day 3 of this torture, I'm walking across the playground all by myself. And suddenly someone grabs me from behind and pulls me backward. And of course, I wheel my arm out to keep my balance, but that arches my chest forward and shows my physical shape through this sheer blouse. And a whole bunch of people all start laughing. And I don't know where everybody came from, but this guy drug me around in a big circle while I'm doing this and then clasping to protect my modesty and then trying to keep from falling down as he's pulling me backwards by my eyes. And when he finally, and I'm hearing people laugh, and when I'm finally dropped in the dirt, I can't see very well, but I do look up and see very blurry. There's a number of people, maybe 20 people, have all gathered around to see this spectacle, and everybody's laughing, including my sometimes best friend. And I went home just incredibly traumatized. And suddenly my mom has a whole new idea. And suddenly, and I had a party to go to that weekend, and she suddenly did everything to me. She takes me to the store, she buys me a bra, she buys me 2 dresses from the teen department that were beautiful and modest, and they weren't sheer blouses. Those 3 sheer blouses completely disappeared. And I had a unibrow. She plucked my eyebrows. She shaved my legs. And what else did she do? And I think she even let me wear makeup for the first time. So she put me through this trauma. And she would never let me shave my legs for that whole previous year. And we had a large school. There were 90 girls. And 2 of us were called the Gorilla Girls because we had such hairy legs, and I had a unibrow. I had a Frida Kahlo brow, and so she's not letting me wear a bra. She's putting me in these sheer blouses, and she won't let me shave my legs. Like I was a very traumatized, pubescent child, and suddenly I'm shaving my legs. She buys me new clothes. She dolls me up, and she sends me to a party. And all of a sudden, the popular girls are inviting me to sit with them at lunch. And I think that this was some psychologist's idea to make me highly committed to always being beautiful, because I had been tortured when I wasn't. And later on in life, I would get over that. And I did always. I went to school with my makeup perfect every single day in high school, my hair done every single day in high school. I was very, very committed to looking beautiful. But I got over it one day, and like I haven't shaved my legs for a decade. Um, and I went for another decade where I wore a bandana on my hair and no makeup. And that has pretty much been the way I've been throughout most of my adult life. Very little makeup, though I have had my little eras. Anyway, that's what they tried to do to me. And then when I went into high school, I really loved dancing. I had no desire to speak or sing on stage except in a group in the choir. I loved singing in the choir, but I didn't want to role, but I wanted to dance in the musicals. And I was very disappointed to find out that if you want to dance in the musicals, you have to sing. You have to make the choir. So I took some voice lessons and I learned how to sing so that I could dance, not because I wanted to sing, but our director also had another rule. If he decided he wanted you for a role, you had to take it or you'd never, ever get a role with him again. So in order to dance, I had to take the risk of having a part. And thankfully I didn't for quite a few years, but eventually he wanted me to play roles. And the roles that I ended up being cast for, and now I could leave my whole community of friends in theater arts if I wanted, but this is the first time I ever had friends. I had been so shy. I'd had very few friends, through grade school. And now in the theater group, the one place that welcomes slightly weird kids, I wanted to be there. I didn't want to say no and walk away. So I would occasionally take a role if I had to. And, but toward the end, I got cast as a stripper and a prostitute. And then and then I have to explain that in college, I got sucked into being in a sorority. And I didn't want to. I considered them exactly the sort of people I did not want to be with. They reminded me of my parents. I'm wanting to get out on my own. I'm wanting to go chase the hippie scene. The last thing I want is to be in a sorority because they're all acting like so proud of themselves and sure of themselves in a way that I don't feel. And they just remind me too much of my parents. I don't want to be with them. But I got manipulated into at least trying them out, and I was mind controlled on top of it. And everybody I knew was telling me I was missing an opportunity to say no. So I did join them and then quit. But while I joined them, they then cast me as Mata Hari, a sexual spy. So I started feeling really creeped out that just because I want to dance in these school musicals, that I keep being cast in these sexual roles that I'm not welcoming, I feel really uncomfortable with, and everyone's dolling me up and dressing me up in black with a slit up my side and fishnet stockings and my high heels. This just constant sexualizing. And they talk about grooming kids now. I was totally being groomed in the theater department, being groomed to be sexual. And after the sorority cast me as Mata Hari, it did something to me. I just felt like I have to get away. And I ended up running away from college. And at that point, everything that I did seemed to be sabotaged. Eventually I was married, I had children, I became an activist for social justice and the environment. My husband and I were Christians. He became a minister. I was a minister's wife, but he was under terrible stress and he became abusive to me. And we ended up getting divorced. And all this time, I'm completely oblivious to mind control. I'm oblivious to altars, but there are strange things that are happening that I can't understand. And I just keep putting them in my anomaly file, while trying to figure out, why am I different? What's wrong? I just can't figure out how I can be so smart that I score at genius levels in some, fields like mathematics, and just really good at puzzles, three-dimensional puzzles, all of that. And yet I feel so stupid when I get around people. And I think it's because I have alters. It's like a whole committee. Just takes a little bit longer to process things than a single person does. But I hadn't figured that out yet. And so I'm frequently very, very stressed. And I go to counselors now and then. And everyone tells me that you're doing great. You've got a good handle on, on reality, your problems. You come up with logical solutions to solve them, and you're doing great. What else can I do to support you? So, I didn't keep paying money because everyone kept telling me I was doing okay, but I would check in with the, therapists now and then. I was an environmental activist for a long time, but when I divorced, I got remarried. My second husband, when I divorced, wouldn't let me in the house where all of our friends always met for our environmental meetings. And so I was completely cut off from my entire community that I had built and I had become a valued member of. I had, as a media consultant, before I was a media consultant, I had won a first place United Press International Journalism Award for Best Radio Feature in the states of Arizona and Utah. I had been really successful sometimes. And but suddenly I lost all my connections, all my friends. I was what was called bad jacketed. In other words, they'd put a jacket on me that said I was bad. And I don't know that I knew that they knew I was a mind control subject. I sure didn't. But maybe they had noticed some things that made them think I was a spy. And now I think that I might have been. The environmental activist group I was in was Earth First, which had a pretty radical reputation throughout the United States. This was a group that was doing tree sits and stuff like that. We in Tucson were pretty tame compared to the Earth Firsters on the West Coast. We were real tame. They made fun of us for that. The most things we did was like street theater and maybe lockings on or something. As a matter of fact, I locked my neck onto the front axle of a road grader once in order to stop a road grader from traveling toward a forest we wanted them to leave alone. So we didn't hurt machinery or destroy anything. We just put our lives on the line and made our points to the media. That was my thing, right? I was a media activist. So anyway, but now suddenly I lose all my friends. And I've just had this nervous breakdown because my son has cancer, and just my whole life had turned upside down. And I was just not sure how to continue. I ended up going back to school because I would then have student loans to live on, because I discovered I couldn't work. I had just actually been offered the ownership of a business that grossed $3 to $4 million a year. It was the third largest bird watching tour company in the world. And I had been working there for him for about 6 months. And I was considering accepting it. He says, I've been looking for someone to take over my business. You're the first person who has the skills to do it. I want to train you to do my job and then turn it all over to you, and you will own this phenomenal business. And I was entertaining the idea, even though I knew I was more interested in starting things, like the brainstorming and the visionary work and getting things going. I was not interested in day-to-day management. I could do that, but I didn't want to make a commitment to do that for the next 20 years. Even though it would make lots of money, I was never motivated by money. As a matter of fact, when I was a little tiny child and my parents told me about money, I was like, oh, this can't go well. Seriously, I think as a child, I still had past life memories, and I just didn't think capitalism was a very good idea for how to run a planet. And so I just never really got that much into capitalism. So here I'm offered $3 to $4 million business, and I'm like, I'll think about it. Well, then my son got cancer. My husband and I decided to divorce, and everything went down the tubes. I decide to leave him. Suddenly I'm bad jacketed and I'm all on my own with a sick child and another child who's angry at me and for making them move. And I decided to move out to the desert because in the divorce, my husband didn't want to give me much money, and he decided this land he had bought, he didn't like that much. So he gave me the land instead of money. And that was actually great. I was sitting in the city feeling all stressed out, and I suddenly heard some backup beeps from a trash can. And I'm like, I can't take this. I got to get out of here. And I suddenly realized I have an out. I have land. I have land outside the city. I could leave and go sit out there, discover, explore the spiritual realms, because I was an angry, after having been a minister's wife and a very serious Christian, I had gotten very disappointed by the church and I had become an angry atheist. I had forgotten my earlier experiences with Jesus. It just didn't fit with my anger. And so, and the church had actually helped my husband take my kids away from me for 2 years. I had had to fight to get them back. I lost them for 2 years. So I'm really angry. But when I was hanging out with all these environmental people who totally believed in the spirituality of our world and the multi dimensions and in angels and the spirit of the forest and all that, I'm like, okay, I'm open. If there's something spiritual to be learned, spirit will teach me. I don't think I need to go to any books or any church. I'm tired of churches. I'm going to go out to the desert, going to get away from all this city brouhaha and people who don't want to talk to me anymore. I'm going to be in the desert and I'll have some experiences like maybe like St. Francis. And I was just so open to that. And that's what I was expecting. And so I accepted every single credit card offer that came in the mail, and I used credit cards to build my house. I figured that the interest I was paying wouldn't add up to any more than rent in the city. So what the heck? And that was my ticket out of town. And so I moved out there. I built a little tiny straw bale house, passive solar, off grid, rainwater roof, rainwater harvesting roof. And I started, spirit really opened up to me when I moved out to the desert. And I had a lot of amazing experiences. And that friend who I told you had written me and said, hey, here's some sites that might explain our stuff. She and I became friends. And when I told her I'm having all these amazing experiences, like I had this experience with these ravens, like this is like more than coincidental, and look on these amazing things happening. And she says, I think we're having shamanic initiations. And to me, that sounded like, oh, I did mention St. Francis. That's a pretty special thing, but I didn't really think that was going to happen to me. And shamanic is so exotic. And I just, but something inside me said, stop resisting. Just accept that spirit is talking to you now. And maybe that's what she means by shamanic, and just open yourself up to it and go for this. So I did have a bunch of amazing years in which I could understand what was going on through the lens of the shamanic experience as described by shamans all over the world. When they talk to anthropologists, they've put together a kind of an understanding that completely matched my life. So I started reading books on shamanism and even went to conferences on shamanism. And I was very confused, like, how does Jesus fit in with shamanism? And at this time, I still don't know that I'm multiple. I still don't know. Oh, I think I had found out I was multiple, but I did not know I was a mind control subject. And I didn't understand how Jesus and shamanism went together. But later on, I would go to a conference of about 500 people, all attending a shamanism conference. And one person said, how many people have Jesus as a major spiritual helper? And 3/4 of the room raised their hands. So all these people studying shamanism, and they say Jesus is one of their main helpers. Oh my goodness. So I still cannot define a doctrine to satisfy anybody. And I sometimes think doctrine just gets in our way. Language is so insufficient for describing a three-dimensional world. It's really difficult for describing the multi-dimensional worlds that we live in. So I'm content to not be able to say, here's the doctrine that explains everything. Anyway, so I spend a lot of time just indulging in peace and quiet and nature and animals that are coming in talking to me sometimes and explaining things and making me feel like there's some intelligence in this world that is benign and benevolent and instructive, and I accept it. I don't understand it entirely. There was a time when I did try to attend some more classes with a shaman who was then going to kind of give me entrance into the rarefied world of people who are truly shamanic practitioners. But I was not all that comfortable with it, and I didn't follow through because I started getting a sense that some people are not really honest, that some people are building themselves up, that they are just playing games and they just love getting out their rattles and being a leader. And I didn't want to follow in that path. I figured spirit wants to talk to me, that's good, but I just did not feel, oh, and I discovered sometimes that if I did try to get past my inhibitions and do rituals like prescribed by some book or teacher, that didn't seem to go well. I seemed instead to be attacked by really frightening entities. So I quit it and said, I'll come back to this if I ever feel called, and I've never felt called. But sometimes spirit has moved through me in ways that acted very shamanic. Like, for instance, I had a very close friend who suddenly was diagnosed with brain cancer. And she'd gone to a second doctor who had diagnosed her with the same very terrible brain cancer. And then she'd gone to, and they had done all the tests, third one, brain cancer. And I'm in the midst of this trying to make a decision about where do I feel like I fit in the shamanic world, you know? Should I be getting out my rattles and lighting candles and doing something? Or should I just be praying? I should just pray for her to be healed, because I'd had a few experiences in which I had inadvertently participated in somebody's healing. I hadn't even had time to think about it, but something had just happened and I had done something, and bam, everybody around was saying, whoa, she was suddenly healed. So I'm thinking, well, therefore I should do this. But I didn't want to. I didn't want it to come from me. So for days, I had ignored this rational thought to pray because my heart and soul was just scared to pray. I thought, if I do a ritual and she doesn't get healed, I'm going to feel like a fool. All my belief system's going to be upset, and I'm going to feel like a fool. So I didn't. But one night I was getting ready for bed, and suddenly I think either some angel healer energy came into me, or something came forth from inside me. And she grabs the rattle, and with this conviction that's beyond me, she shakes it to the east, she shakes it to the south, to the west, to the north, and she calls in 3 different animals. She calls in the raven to carry the healing energy across the nation to where she was. And I'm not in charge. I'm up here witnessing, going, oh my goodness, she sure has power, but it wasn't me. And then the dragonfly to open the portal. I've since learned that dragonflies are thought to be associated with portals. And then the snake, who is considered healing by many ancient people, to do the healing. And then when she was done, I don't know how she finished it up, and she put the rattle down and she was done. And I'm left here going, whoa. So the next day I get a phone call, and my friend has been healed. She has gotten another test, and they don't know why 3 doctors before thought that she had this terrible brain cancer. She now doesn't. So I have occasionally been used, and I could tell a couple other stories where I didn't intend to do anything, but the opportunity was there, and I followed an unusual urge that I had. Like I told this one woman next to me on the plane who had told me about some terrible disease that she had. And for some reason, I'm saying, can I put my hand on you? It's like, I've never done anything like that. That was not me talking. May I put my hand on you? And I put my hand on her, and my rational brain is thinking, oh, I'm just going to feel muscle tension, and maybe I'll, because I used to dabble in massage and had some good success. I think maybe that's what I'm going to do with this question that has just come out of my mouth. And the woman suddenly just looks at me and goes, oh my God, are you a healer? And I said, I don't know. And she just couldn't say anything more. She seemed to have been completely relieved of whatever pain she'd been in. So occasional things like this would happen. And so therefore I would continue to have a great interest in shamanism. And then when I went to that conference, and many of them had relationships with Jesus, I just kind of allowed these two to be in some connection that was with me that I didn't fully understand, not in a right brain doctrinal way, but this is what I'm living with, and this is what I'm hoping will help me. And I am constantly praying to understand what's wrong with me. I still don't know what's wrong with me. I'm still trying to figure myself out, and what is it making my life so weird? But I'm feeling definitely very good to be in the desert, away from the city, away from clocks. I did not have a television. I didn't even have a radio. I lived with peace and quiet, the sound of the breezes, the sound of the birds, and that was my life. And of course, when you're like that, spirit can talk to you wonderfully. And I just kept having amazing experiences. Like a few people who were in the community who I'd had a chance to meet and had really wonderful connections with, when they died, they came to tell me. And I wasn't even one of their best friends. I was just somebody who kind of like knew them incidentally. And the only thing I could figure was, no, everybody else was sitting in front of the television when they died. And as they were cruising through, getting ready to leave this plane, they looked around the planet, and there's Jean, no TV, no radio, no nothing. She's sitting quietly on her patio, and they would come by and talk to me. And then the next day I'd find out that they had passed away. So things like that would happen. Yeah. While I was out there on the land, and I'm feeling really, really grateful for these shamanic things, I think are teaching me something about our multidimensional world. I also had UFO experiences, which I did not welcome at all. The very first experience I had, I just woke up in the morning and suddenly was like, oh my God, what am I doing living out here in the desert? A UFO could land out there. And then I'm like, what are you talking about? You don't even believe in UFOs. What a stupid dream. And I just jumped out of bed and tried to get really busy so that I wouldn't think about it. But when I did think about it, I kept having, and I was in the habit of writing everything down. I had a journal that, I could fill up a journal in a month, because I just wrote down when I was studying my dreams, I was trying to write down everything that happened to me in dreams. So I'm thinking that this is a dream, and I'm writing about this, and I write in my journal, and I saw aliens at the window, but that's what I wrote down. what I really saw was aliens coming through the window. And I did not want to admit that to myself, but I think I corrected it and made myself say the truth. Later on, I would have so many experiences. I made I checked my list, and I had 12 experiences of a single UFO. And then I had multiple experiences of multiple UFOs. I was also stopped on the highway once. I had just gone to a women's spirituality meeting, gathering for like 3-4 days. And at the time, I had a boyfriend living with me on my land. And this is before cell phones. So I get gas and I'm on the last leg home. And I have my car lights go out, and my Volkswagen van, just all the electricity turned off. So I just pull off to the side of the road, and I think, well, I'm just quarter mile from the gas station. I guess I'll just walk back. And then I found myself just sitting there. And so then I talked to myself, like, come on, let's get up, go lock up and walk back to the gas station. And I was frozen. I couldn't move. I gave myself pep talks and tried to get myself to get up and go walk back to the gas station and call my boyfriend. And finally, a voice came in and says, well, maybe if you just sit here, you'll think of something better than walking back. And like, that doesn't make any sense to me, but let me sit here for a little while. And then I have this idea to turn the key to see whether the lights might come on again. No, I was going to turn the key so that the steering wheel would move, and I was going to coast down the hill and get closer to the gas station. So I thought that was my great idea. So I turned the key and the lights came back on. I turned it all the way, the engine starts back up, and I can drive. So I just drove home. And when I get there, so I think I'm going to be maybe 20 minutes later than I thought. Instead, I'm an hour and a half later than I thought. And my boyfriend is freaked out. He had just decided to get his keys and come find me. And we didn't find out I didn't realize till the next morning that that I'd been so late. I was really, really surprised, and I had a number of symptoms. One of them was that I wouldn't find out for years later. All I knew was that something was wrong I don't know whether YouTube will allow me to say a anatomical part. We'll say my very intimate inside parts had been lacerated seriously. So we were not able to have sex ever again in our relationship because I had so much pain. And then later on that afternoon, I blew a big blood clot out of my nose, which is also kind of classic for, alien experiences. And later on, I would find an implant in my nose. When I bought a digital camera to go in your ear, I stuck it up my nose and I found an implant in there. So I have photographs on it, and I think it's on my website. So all of a sudden, the shamanic world has gotten really, really weird with aliens. So I had always been interested in self-hypnosis since I was a teenager. And so I coached my boyfriend in how to assist me into a self-hypnosis state so that I can understand what happened on that highway. And I had already heard stories about people having alien experiences with highway stops. And I did not want that. I was just so upset. But I was telling myself, get ready for it. I had read a bit of Whitley Strieber, and I just was trying to get myself ready to see these big-headed, skinny beings and big eyes. And I just didn't want to, but I wanted to be brave. And and so I went into hypnosis, and what I heard and saw was men dressed as auto mechanics coming to the side of my vehicle, sliding the door open, calling my name, And then suddenly I could move. I then could turn sideways, and this was a Volkswagen van, and I'd just been, camping, and I had my bed still made up in the back. And he said, basically, get in the back and lay down. And so I had turned to go do as directed. And my rational brain freaked out over the fact, I didn't like the idea of aliens, but I really did not like the idea of government agents instead. That was really, really scary to me. And so I pulled myself out of hypnosis and I said, well, I learned something. It doesn't necessarily have to be aliens. It might be government agents. And so ever since then, everything to do with aliens, I think we should hold with suspicion, because they could be government agents. They could be CIA, somebody from this other network. So my understanding of the multidimensional world just continued to get more and more complicated with with all this weird stuff that we can hardly talk to anybody about, right? We saw a UFO shot down. We heard the reconnaissance coming nearby. I once was taken up into the sky by one. Oh, I had a man in black kind of dogging me in our small community. He wasn't really a man in black. I called him that, but it does not, I'm not describing one of the stereotypes where the guys come to your door and they're dressed identically. This guy just happened to wear black, but as soon as I saw him, I felt like I knew that he was an agent of some sort. And sure enough, one time I was holding a solar oven workshop. He came to it and he made himself the last person to leave. And then he came up to me as I was trying to head indoors. I think he's leaving, but he turns around and he comes toward me and says, I heard you're having trouble with your computer. I can help. And I'm thinking, no way, buddy, I got your number. But instead I say, okay. And I let him in the house. I let him on my computer. I let him do stuff that I'm not even aware of what he's doing. And then he goes to a website. And back then, you were never supposed to go to a website that you didn't know what it was, because it could, potentially download harmful malware on your computer. And yet I let him. He went to a website, and then he turns around and he asked me a question that I had been telling people this story. And I knew it was going to take me a while. And I knew that leaving my computer on that website was dangerous, and that he was giving himself time for it to download something onto my computer. And in my head, I said, oh, well, this is the end of your computer. And he listens to my story. He checks my computer. He does not show me anything that he's done. He just suddenly closes the computer down, shuts it down, and he says, happy to help. And he walks out my front door. And when I shut the door behind him, I come out of my trance and I run to my computer, and it never operated again. And I could never get anybody to fix it. And tomorrow was a deadline for a project that I had. So he wrecked my computer, and he wrecked my first attempt to restart my business as a media consultant. He wrecked it because I was now going to have to scramble around to finish the project. I would be literally driving hundreds of miles the next day, borrowing a computer, begging my client to send me files, finishing the thing up, all because he had wrecked my computer. Yeah, you're scrolling past my taser burns and my scoop marks. I've had a lot of marks on my body. Those mostly started when I moved away from my hermitage, and I'm scanning my notes to see, oh yeah, we had a big triangle come by our house too while I was out on the land with that boyfriend. That was a taser burn and the strange way that it healed. I think that was another one. Yeah, so shall I just continue? Want to hear the triangle story?
Yeah, absolutely. And that would be this one,
Okay.
right?
No, I'm talking about a triangle UFO in the sky.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, so we were working in town, but we heard this huge, it sounded like a jet just buzzed the house. And because we had to work the next morning, I didn't want to jump up and and get my adrenaline up because we had to get up early in the morning. So I just convinced him, like, just stay in bed, don't move, we need to sleep, don't get our adrenaline up. So we did. Went to town. Next time back home, we were not going to be getting up the next morning, and we heard this thing that sounded like it was an Air Force jet, sounded like it was just inches over the top of the house. It rattled the windows. It was really, really an incredible experience. Didn't have to get up, so I was ready. I jumped out of bed. I grabbed my binoculars. I don't know if we even had a cell phone back then, for taking photos. Jumped out, ran outside, and I don't see a jet zooming away anywhere. And then my boyfriend comes out and he looks straight up and he goes, "Oh my God." And I said, "You mean those 3 jets up there? Like, that looked like they were far away?" And he goes, "Those aren't 3 jets. Those are 3 lights on the bottom of a huge triangle." And neither of us remember anything else other than walking back in the house, sort of like zombies. So we both kind of thought that something had happened.
You know how much
I should remember. Excuse me?
you know how much time went by? Did you guys have like an hour and a half again that was just gone? Not sure.
I had been in a habit of living without clocks. I had thought that that was a good idea. I thought that it was like freeing myself from the industrial schedule, but it was also keeping me from noticing missing time.
Okay.
So I thought I was being so smart, and I might have been playing right into my mind control. I also, my boyfriend, when he came, he brought 3 teepees with him. He had been living in teepees for I don't know how long before meeting me. So he brought his teepees with him. One of them was his art studio and bedroom and kitchen. The other was his office. And then he had another one that was just a bedroom, and he gave that to me as a gift. So we set that up outside. And one morning I was working. My boyfriend was gone to town for some reason. And in the middle of the morning, I just suddenly felt like I had to lie down and sleep immediately. So I went in the teepee, I lay down, and I was woken up by the sound of what I thought was my boyfriend coming in the teepee, and it sounded like he was scraping his back on the curve of the door. Now, he never did that. It was his teepee. He knew how to get it. He was a big guy. He was like over 6 feet, but he still never scraped on the door. But somebody was coming in the door and scraping on the arch of the canvas. But I'm still thinking it's him. And I don't turn to say hi. I just think, well, he'll either leave or he might get onto his side of the bed, which would be climbing over me. And then I'll say hi to him when he's in front of me. And instead, I feel a knee on the side of the bed, and I think that he's going to plop over. And then the next thing I feel is something touch the back of my skull. And immediately I see this being. It is not my boyfriend. I can see him with some other sight. And he has a military bearing, but he is a reptilian. And he is very big. And that's why he was scraping his back on the door. And as soon as I see him behind me, some sort of other sight, I am flippin' terrified, but I can't move or do anything. But I feel like I can move my face. And so I mime screaming bloody murder so that he knows I'm strongly objecting to whatever you're doing to me. And then I don't remember anything else. And then I don't know how much longer my boyfriend does come home, and I tell him about the story, and he's just completely clueless about it. Another time we were in bed, and I had been reading Whitley Strieber, who was always thinking about the aliens as, you know, the visitors and the teachers and nice things about them. And so I'm always assuming that the aliens have some positive effect in our lives, some way, maybe, even though I was terrified of the reptilian. But I'm still keeping an open mind. And for some reason, I just decided to check myself. Oh, because he's always saying, you know, ask the aliens if you want to see them. And so this time I just decided to check up, and I read Whitley Strieber's most recent blog. And he's saying, they're not all good. And I'm like, oh God, now you tell me? Now you tell us after all these years? And I forget, he gave some other advice, and I decided I'm going to try that. Oh, I said, if what was it? I was asking for some sort of information. So I go to sleep that night, and oh yeah, ask to stay conscious. That's what it was. If you want to know, ask to stay conscious. So I go to bed that night, and I'm praying, if there's anything that I should be learning, I pray to be conscious of it. So I wake up, and I'd been sleeping in the teepee outside, and I wake up with the sensation of my non-physical body going up through the canvas. I just distinctly remember waking up and feeling my spirit body, or some part of me that I don't know, going through the angle of the teepee canvas. And then I'm going straight up in the sky. And I'm thinking, I've seen photographs of things like cows going up a beam and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, like there's part of me that wanted to laugh. It's like, this is so ridiculous. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm staying conscious. Yay, they answered my prayers. I'm conscious. Okay, now the next thing I have to remember is to not be fucking terrified. I gotta keep my act together. I'm open-minded. I'll see anything you want to show me. Boy, this is cool. Oh, this is so funny. I can't believe it. I'm immobilized going up a beam. This is like so wild. Like I totally had my rational mind critiquing the whole experience. And suddenly I hit a portal and spin around, and I shoot out to the left side. And I'm trying to remember everything. Okay, you went up for a while, then you hit the portal, then you turn left. And so I'm going along, it feels like a conveyor belt sideways. And then I hit another portal. And then I come out right sideways, and I estimate, since I'm a mathematician, that I'm about 60 degrees going backwards this way. So I'm memorizing 90 degrees, 60. Those were two portals. And I'm like, okay, now don't be afraid when you finally get to the ship. Don't freak out. And then I just wake up in the morning. So they didn't let me see anything, but I did remember all that very, very well. And then I went through a period of time where I was afraid of recording everything in my journal, because it seemed to me that somebody was using what I wrote in my journal to make other things happen. And I just felt like I didn't like being spied on. So for a little while, I wouldn't write things down. And one of the things that I wouldn't write down was the article that I came across by pure coincidence, where some man was describing his experience with aliens. And he talked about going up over 90 degrees and then out sideways 60 degrees. And I was so grateful to have been led towards some confirmatory account of somebody else. I was really, really grateful for that, but I was afraid to write it down for some reason. And then later on, I could never find that again. So anyway, that's just a little bit of all of the aliens and UFO stuff that happened during those 5.5 years that I was a hermit. But a lot of that stuff started scaring me so badly that I wanted it to end. And none of my prayers would make it end. It just kept on happening. And I didn't know what to make of it. I wasn't finding it. I was finding some confirmatory information, but not enough to make me feel confident about it. my boyfriend and I were we're not getting along, and I finally asked him to leave. And when he left and I was completely broke, I decided that if I sold the house, I would have some money to start over. And I'd had enough of being out here feeling like a sitting duck for aliens. I just had to go somewhere else. And I could sell the land, I'd get some cash, and that would buy me some time to figure out where to try to live the rest of my life. So that's what I did. Boyfriend left, I sold the house, I bought myself a trailer, hooked it up to a truck, and hit the road. And eventually landed in a small town. Actually, I'd been on the road for a whopping 4 days when I drove into the small town and went, oh, this is where I'm supposed to live. I can just feel it. I know it. Well, I bought a trailer for nothing. But so I settled down for 10 years. And what was interesting about this is that all the alien stuff stopped. I continued to have a lot of very, very weird stuff, but suddenly it had an entire different quality. And the way I explain this now is the mind controllers who have been watching me and following me all my life, I didn't tell you about when I found out I was mind controlled while I was still on the land, so I need to come back to that. But the mind controllers have a huge network all over the world, but they don't have that many people to choose from if you're living in a little tiny remote county off grid, like Cochise County, Arizona. It's a very small county, not many people out there. So who is in their network that they can have be my handler, my watcher? And I think they chose somebody from the nearby Fort Huachuca, which is the United States #1 intelligence for Air Force Base. That's their top intelligence. That equals CIA, that equals MK. I was living within easy distance of a military base involved in mind control. I didn't realize it then. And so I think that they have something to do with the alien agenda. And that's why I was seeing a lot of aliens and UFOs then. It had something to do with the fact that I was near the base. Then when I moved to this small town, there's no base around there, but there happened to be a lot of, I'm probably guessing, Freemasons. And among them, a lot of doctors. And so for the next 10 years, almost no alien or UFO things, but two. Most of them all seemed to be doctor stuff. I woke up with injection bruises, taser burns, biopsy scoop marks, and my back mysteriously way wrecked. I even had a rib out one time. There was a chiropractor who would mess up my back at night whenever they just wanted to slow me down. So doctor stuff for 10 years, the previous 5.5 years, all alien stuff. Before that, I was in the city and they had access to a whole lot more people in the network, I'm sure. And I didn't even recognize any particular pattern to that. But, and then when I left that small town and I became a nomad for some years, then they were back to having the ad hoc tapping people wherever they discover I've gone next to figure out what to do with me. And so when I was on the road, it had a whole other character. It was very chaotic and different month to month, depending on where I was traveling in my trailer. Anyway,
wow, you've had so many adventures, so many places that you've been to. And it was like you were called there, like it was an intuition for you, and you just knew, okay, I'm supposed to be here, I'm supposed to be here. And each time you had all these different mystical experiences almost.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was good intuition leading me or if I was following mind control prompts.
Right.
I don't really know. And it could be that when I moved to that charming small town. That could have been a mind control prompt telling me to move there. But I don't know. I hold a lot of I've tried to be very, very careful in documenting my life, which I have been doing since, well, I've documented my life since the 80s, but I burned everything up to Y2K. I wish I had not. I really wish that I still knew what I'd written down in the 90s. Oh my goodness, those were my environmental activism years. I would love to know what I wrote down about my second husband and all that activism we did. But I don't know. But I documented very, very carefully, what did I perceive separate from my emotions and what I thought about it. And I tried not to ever jump to conclusions. And some of the conclusions I might jump to were kind of scary. And they were definitely things that nobody in your life wanted you to believe. So it was very easy to say, it's a theory, and I don't have to take it into my life and live with this. I can have this horrible theory out here about mind control, but I can still live my life as if it's not happening. And so that's kind of plays into your own dissociation, into my own multipleness, to have part of me that understands, and then another part of me pretends it's not true. It helps me get by in the world, not be too depressed, unless I decide that I want to work with this information. But if not, I can just push it off here and just keep on living, using the social skills that I finally developed over the decades, and just forget that that's part of my life. So I have a lot of theories, and I cannot say that I am in any way close to integrated and completely understanding it. I'm working with my working theories, and I'm not sure that this is the best way to be, but it's how I am. And it's as far as I've gotten, in my evolution in this lifetime.
Whenever you were in the
More,
as a child, what did they use you for?
Oh, I think they try to use all of us. I think they try to train us for a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. So some of the most benign would be spying and courier work. Have you heard of courier work? You can go somewhere and say something to somebody, and that is either delivering critical information for them. You might, for all you know, be delivering a code that tells them to go do something, and then you might not even remember it. So I've got another an acquaintance who says, oh yeah, I used to be a mind control subject. I was a courier. And she said this with like casual cheer. I was really shocked. And I thought, how do you know that you're not still one? And how are you so casual about this? But I didn't know her that well. I didn't challenge her. But anyway, so anybody can be a courier. And just last year, like I never really have so related to that particular task. But last year, I found myself going to a place of business. I could have gone anywhere in town, but somebody told me to go there. Later on, I checked with him and said, why'd you tell me to go to that place? He goes, oh, I never told you that. So I don't know if he's lying, if he doesn't remember, or if it was put in my head that it was him, but it was really put in my head by mind control. I don't know. I showed up at this place of business. I immediately recognized it as a front for something, a front for some illegal activities. You can just tell the color paint inside, the big, huge bodyguard guys in there. It's like, this is not a legit business. I should even be scared of this, but for some reason I didn't. And I just tell the guy how I'm looking for this thing and I want to buy this thing. And does he know where blah, 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 blah. And finally he comes out to my car because it had to do with my car. And I find myself telling him, I'll remember you. And that's not the sort of thing that I would say to anybody. And then I heard myself saying it to him again, meeting his eyes, I'll remember you. And then as I drove away, I went, whoa, I've never had this thought before, but I think I was just doing a mind control courier sort of thing. I'm not happy about this at all, but I really feel like my doggedness, like I had to go to that store despite my, thinking this is not a good place to be. I think I did. I I just had to interpret it that way. And then I went back, like I said, why did you ask me to go to that place? And he's like, I never mentioned that. So anyway, career's one thing. Another one is sex. And I believe that I was used as a sex slave as a child. I believe I was used in sex pornography. I think that's, and it's odd that I was willing to be on stage as a dancer, but I never wanted to open my mouth on stage. And the very first few times that I was in a theater class in high school, I was completely terrified of the stage. Just the idea of opening my mouth on stage and saying my name was just the scariest thing in the world. And when I was a very young child, I had nightmares. One of them being of watching the very end of a cartoon, and the cartoon character then exposes himself on stage. And I woke up from this dream wondering, what's that all about? Well, I think that it might have to do with some of the stuff I was trained for, especially when you look at how they were trying to condition me later in my teen years to be on stage playing these sexual roles. So I'm pretty sure that I was used for that. And then I seem to have also been trained in martial arts, even though I think I took my kids to 1 or 2 karate classes, and that's about all we had. But the kids were coming home from school having fallen down on the playground on asphalt and just scraped the skin off of them. And I said, well, remember your karate class. Next time you're going to fall, see if you can tuck and roll. And they were always like, oh, Mom, that'd be so embarrassing. I said, well, you won't have blood on your hands. So I decided to go running one day. I had jogged way back in my 20s, and I decided I needed to get better exercise. So one Saturday morning, I have on my running shoes, and I'm just running through the neighborhood. It was a Sunday. It was very quiet. And my old shoes had a little tab in front that caught on the asphalt, and I was tripping, and I was going to go down. And I did a perfect tuck and roll and came up on my feet running without a single mark on my body. And I was so surprised. I looked around like, did someone watch me while they're having breakfast? This is just like, what?
You're like a ninja.
Right. So later on, when I learned about mind control, I went, well, wow, maybe they taught me martial arts, and I just don't have no memory of it. And then a really biggie happened. Before I was in that small town, in the middle of my hermitage years, I fell in love with my high school crush. We met each other at our 25th high school reunion. And so he asked me to come visit him, and we ended up in a relationship for 4.5 years. And it was really good because I was depressed and, confused. And he also needed some moral support for things he was going through. And it was a very loving, important relationship. Just lasted 4.5 years though. And during that time, we got woken up in the middle of the night once by some crazy guy throwing himself against our door, trying to break the front door down. And then in between throwing himself against the door, we could hear him talking in a really weird voice. And it was kind of freaky. And somebody either came out of me or into me. And suddenly I'm up here looking down again going, oh my goodness, this woman who's come inside me. She tells my boyfriend, call 911. She grabs a big knife and she's standing in front of the door and she's bouncing from foot to foot. She's checked in the heft of and balance of the knife. She's listening to him, trying to gauge how heavy he is. And if he crashes through the door, which way will he fall? Will he fall mostly down? Will he come in mostly on his feet? Will he be falling to the side? And I'm practicing on my feet, for every different possibility. And I know exactly what I'm doing with this knife to kill him, make it a clean kill. And this woman has some little thought things going on that have context around them. She's saying basically, and I don't know if they were really words or just feelings, I can't wait. I'm so happy. It's been a long time. And implied in all of that was absolutely no fear. It's going to be a clean kill. She's just going to kill this guy. And she's so glad that he's giving her the opportunity to kill somebody by breaking into the house, that she has a right legally to kill him. And she's ready. She's ready. She can't wait, ready to kill. And I'm up here going, oh my goodness. But I'm also kind of happy because I'm terrified. I've never heard somebody sounding crazy outside my door trying to get in. And it turns out the police arrived first before he came in. And interestingly, the police didn't want to write a report. They resisted writing a report. I finally had to absolutely insist I wanted a report written. So they started writing, but when they left, they gave me nothing. And when I called the next day asking for the report, there was no report ever turned in.
My gosh.
So I don't know whether that was a mind control setup to see whether my assassin alter would come out, or whether they were just protecting the mayor's son who was, on drugs, or I don't know why or what. But that did give me the sense that I might have been trained in assassination for all I know.
Which is
now
really
when, I don't know. I don't know when they might have.
That's all so common. It seems like a lot of survivors end up getting used in multiple ways in these programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have another friend who she had a very traumatic childhood, but probably not mind control. But she is a counselor and therapist now. And because she had her own childhood trauma, she has attracted a clientele of people with childhood trauma. And a whole lot of them she's suddenly discovering are mind control people who found their way to her. So she wants me to come visit or at least do a Zoom meeting and talk with all these other mind control subjects who are, it's interesting. They're all about my age and they're all finally understanding what's been done to them. And I don't know, it related to whatever you said last. I can't remember what point I was going to make.
Yeah, just that, a lot of survivors, they're used specifically for like one thing, if they're really good at it, or they're used for multiple different things, whether it's psychic abilities or remote viewing, assassin training, the beta sex kitten, there's so many, it's so sad what they do,
Yeah.
but they like as many ways to exploit a child as they're able to.
Right. So I think they give us a little bit of training and everything to see where our skills lie. And then they go on from there. I was interviewed once by another UFO guy who also understands mind control. And he thought that my early lessons in baton twirling was preparation for maybe handling knives and everything with skill. I've never thought of that before, but okay, maybe. Or maybe nunchucks or whatever, because I could handle a baton well. He thought that was an early cover for, just building skills that might be used anyway.
So what are your thoughts on, you talked a lot about UFOs. Do you think, I'm guessing that you've probably along your journey possibly met other people who have experienced it. You met a podcaster. Have you come to any conclusion about its relationship to MK Ultra potentially? Do you notice that a lot of MK Ultra victims and survivors are more susceptible to these experiences? Or what are your thoughts on that part?
That is still a really good question for me. I do know that the government, let's just look at the whole history of our nation regarding these two things. I think it was in the 40s during World War II that the Nazis developed the first UFO, I think, is talked about in Germany. There's photos of it, and the Air Force was always talking about the Foo Fighters, right? There were these mysterious things flying around their planes that they could not catch up with. So the United States became aware of mysterious things in the sky during World War II and associated with the Nazis. After World War II, we bring Nazi scientists over under Operation Paperclip, and suddenly we have our first UFOs over here. We also have the atomic bomb, and we also have mind control evolved. All those things came at the same time to the US from Germany, from Nazis specifically. That's the baseline that I think we can all completely agree with. Now, what's the connection between them? I'm not sure, but I kind of suspect that the mind control, like a lot of things, might have been taught to our scientists by alien races, possibly. You know, the world history given to us by the Sumerians? Have you heard much about it, like the Anunnaki and all? Well, when they were trying to develop the best worker, the best human to operate the mines and all, they wanted a worker who was smart enough, but not too smart to object to the conditions of his work. And that's in the Sumerian history, that they were frustrated that they had developed this human who was intelligent enough and strong enough to work, but they were bothered that the humans were too social, and they wanted to just spend too much time goofing around. They even mentioned too much time having sex, too much time goofing around, and not enough time focusing. And so here now we have mind control, which is, and mind control, maybe trying to help humans be better focused, because you've been mind controlled to be better focused. Also, look at autism. People very poorly socialized who at least know how to focus so well that they can do tasks very, very well, sometimes be geniuses in certain areas. I don't mean to conflate autism and mind control, but I do wonder if there's a connection there. But I think a case could be made that the aliens have been teaching humans how, well, just read the Bible. You know, God gave us all these various plants, taught them how to use them, taught, you know, how to use the different plants for food and for medicine. And I just wouldn't, I think it fits within the pattern that they might also have been teaching how to mind control workers to work and not socialize so much. It's what the Sumerians said they wanted in their creation of humans. And it seems to be what we now have on the planet, is this technology of how to control people. And I even think that all the different economic systems that are practiced all over the planet, from, you know, communism to capitalism, that they're all used to try to control people, to make them work, make them stay focused, because that's what the gods created us for, was to work, according to the Sumerian histories. And it has a lot of parallels to the book of Genesis. Do you know in the second chapter of Genesis, gold is mentioned before creating man and woman? I think the gods were very interested in exploiting this planet. And now they're exploiting people to help them exploit the planet. Or they created humans, and of course they're exploiting us. That's why they created us, according to the Sumerian history, which Genesis seems to be a short Cliff Notes version of the Sumerian history. It's not the interpretation that we like. but it has a very interesting harmony and consistency. It's not a happy interpretation, but I'm playing with it. It's because it makes sense.
And that's really it. You know, like we have to ask these questions whether or not they have the answer that we want or not, because there is correlations, there is really interesting things that are very synonymous between certain aspects of history, but we compartmentalize them and separate them instead of trying to find the relationships, you know, and I think that that's really key. So I don't think there's anything wrong at all with just hypothesizing and digging into it, because so many people don't, you know, and whether or not we want it to happen, like this stuff is happening. Like there's still people that allege that they're being abducted. There's still children going through these programs, and then there's children going through the programs that are getting alien programming, you know? So there's overlaps in all of it that we have to look at. What are these relationships between it, you know? And like you mentioned, is that a coincidence that right around the same time UFOs started to be spotted and MK Ultra came on the scene? You know, very odd that neither of those two things existed, especially in America, before that exact time period that overlapped, you know? So is there something to it? Maybe it is just a coincidence, you know, but what if it's not, and we're not connecting it because the news doesn't tell us to? Like, it's all kept separate from us for a reason, so we don't connect any dots.
Right. But they'll connect the dots for us in ways that I don't think are necessarily trustworthy.
Yes, there you go. That's
So,
exactly
yeah.
it.
Yeah. So I've been spending a lot of time deconstructing my life's education, looking for the parts that still continue to make sense and looking for the parts that seem to just not work to help explain things.
So what made you want to speak out? Because over a decade ago, you made that video, you know, and you put that out. So many people saw it in a short amount of time, you know, and then you made a book. I'd love for you to talk about that journey of you saying, oh my gosh, I need to talk about this. This is what I'm going to do, you know, because not a lot of people do end up ever speaking out. And I think it's amazing that you've created all these different things from your experiences.
Thanks. I guess I was so relieved when I finally read somebody else's book and it confirmed a bunch of things that had just been nothing but sad confusion for me for so very long. I'd just been sad and depressed and confused, felt all alone, felt I had things that I couldn't even tell another human being. They're just too weird, made no sense. And suddenly I read somebody else's book and it's like, oh, here's, we're starting to make some meaning here. And so I just thought that it was passing on the gift to the next generation to let me just add my story here. And I hadn't read any stories that were exactly like mine. Like everyone was talking about UFOs and they're talking about mind control. There were very few, I don't know if there were any that tied them together. And there were some that tied spirituality in, but it seemed pretty limited. Like I did read books about aliens being very dangerous, even though Whitley Strieber is saying something else. There were other books written by Christians saying, keep these things out of your life, and here's the prayers to say, and blah, blah, blah. But there just weren't many of them, and I felt like they just didn't go deep enough. And so I thought by writing my book, well, actually, I had the good fortune of meeting a practitioner of shamanism named Ralph Metzner, who actually played a very interesting role in American history. And it might be in a negative way. And it even has some connections that some people might call suspect. So it's another subject for which I don't have the final conclusion, but he told me I had to write a book. So I went to one of his shamanic conferences or workshops, and I went to a couple of them, and I did entheogenic medicine, in other words, hallucinogens, but we don't like that term because it wasn't hallucinating. It was getting in touch with the multidimensional intelligence of the cosmos. So he'd heard my story at the few workshops that I had attended. He knew I was a writer. And then I told him I was thinking of writing a book. He said, good. Many years later, I attended another shamanic conference. This one was Native Americans and others comparing the different worldviews, the Native American worldview and the very highly rational European American worldview, called Oil and Water, Indigenous and Non-Indigenous Ways of Knowing. It was a pretty wonderful experience. And this shamanic teacher was there also. So we had lunch. And when he found out that I wasn't working on my book, he said, write your book. I said, well, I've written it 12 times. I just have thrown it in the trash every time. And he goes, write your book and I will write the foreword. Now, this guy is kind of famous. If you notice the foreword on my book, that's Ralph Metzner. The interesting role he's played in American history was Tim Leary, Ralph Metzner down at the bottom there. So Timothy Leary was a teacher at Harvard, as was Richard Alpert, who later became Ram Dass. And Ralph Metzner was one of their students. And those three ended up becoming a threesome. If you go back and look at the history of this era, you'll see Tim Leary, Richard Alpert, and Ram Dass in India, in California, and Harvard, and different places. So you can think of Tim Leary as the, the showman, trickster, out there, guy making waves in the media. And then there was Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, who was the very spiritual one. And then Ralph Metzner was the quiet, shy academic who only very slowly over the decades took on the shamanic role and ended up helping a lot of people to understand their own healing path and their own spiritual nature through workshops that he would lead. So to have this man tell me that he would write the foreword to my book was a huge motivation. And so I went home, I sat down, and I'd already written it 3 times. And again, thrown it away every time. This time I just sat down and I wrote it. And when I was done, I went back to read page 1, and every other time I'd read page 1 and shuddered and thrown my whole manuscript away without reading it again. This time I read page 1 and I said, I think I got it here. Read the whole thing and I just started editing and I published my book. Sent it to Ralph, of course, and he sent me a foreword. And most of that is on that website, rattlesnakefire.com. I think I put a shortened version of his foreword. It might all be there. I can't really quite remember. Yeah, it looks like, I see some ellipses there, so I didn't put it all in. But having Ralph's encouragement made me think that my book was worth something, even though I wasn't sure that in the end, in my last chapters, I remember working very hard to try to keep a positive spin on it, because there were still parts of me that were still afraid, still confused, still unsure. But I also had other parts of me that could feel confident and that I was indeed working with spiritual aspects of our world that were important to explore, important to try to put into words, and that were leading me to, on a healing path that could be useful to others, even though I don't have all the answers, and I'm going to finish this book with some questions. But I thought that I'd pulled it all together and I had to get it out there. And I was really glad that he encouraged me to do that. But since then, I believe I've been mind controlled to not promote my book. The website has problems that I've wanted for years to fix. And every single time I sit down intending to fix those problems, I just feel all blurry headed and I can't fix them. So you'll find that the page to sell this book is not a very good page. And also, when I was finally publishing the book, I decided not to put a UPC's, those line bars on the back, the black and white lines.
Yeah.
That number is the way that books go into the catalogs that the whole world uses. And because I didn't put one on, there's no way to even catalog my book. So that was a huge mind control lapse that I fell prey to, and I never have fixed it in 14 years. I have not gone on. I would love it if someone would do it for me, because every time I think of how to better make my work more accessible, I sit down at the computer and my mind goes foggy. And I believe it's mind control that's keeping me from properly promoting my book. And all the Amazon reviews disappeared one day. And my video, like I said, it went viral for a week, and then all the numbers started decreasing every single day. I would have fewer and fewer and fewer numbers, and I just watched those numbers go backwards. So my site has been sabotaged in those two ways, and it's been sabotaged by me not being able to do much work. Now, I have continued to make videos, but I kind of forced myself to. And I almost never make them when I feel good, because when I feel good, I've got other things to do. I've been disabled for a week, right? It's like I got to grocery shop and clean the house, and I don't have time for this. And then sometime later, when I'm caught up with things, but my energy's low, that's when I'll typically make a video. So they're not the best videos. And I've even won awards for my video production, but none of these would be, these are just like pathetic, but they're all I can do because I'm fighting against mind control to be able to get my message out. So it's been a struggle, and it's been better than nothing.
Yes. I think it's amazing what you've done. You know, there's so many people who have all the capabilities, all the resources, no health problems, didn't have to go through a lot of things in their life, and they want to write a book and they never do. They want to put a video out and they never do, you know, and there's no excuse not to. And I love, like, all you survivors, you all have overcome not only so much in your past, but even today, like, you guys do things that most people will never do because they're either too scared or they're just too lazy, whatever it is. They don't ever bring their dreams to life. And I love that you've overcome so many obstacles, that you have these, you know, these moments where you're like, I just can't do this. You know, I can't go on my computer. I can't edit things. I don't even know, like, how to make a book. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've never done this before. And you just figure it out and you do it, you know? And I think that's so neat. I think it's amazing. And it doesn't matter, like, how awesome it is or the video production, just the fact that you did it. So many people never do that. It's inspiring, Jean. I love that you have done all of this.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad I've done as much as I have. I wish I had an assistant to help me take all of my ideas into reality. That would be so wonderful. But I'm doing what I can, and I just pray all the time that it is useful to somebody, helps somebody understand their life better, and I wish that it could help the average person who's not struggling with this believe and have compassion and understand. You know how many people just talk about, say, American politics, and they might talk about how Congress is doing this or that, and inevitably people are going to say it's crazy, it makes no sense. But guess what? If you understand that there are hidden factors that are making people act this way, that everybody in Congress has probably been blackmailed in some way, the world makes sense then. You don't have to say anymore that it doesn't make sense. It absolutely makes sense if you will quit being so naive as to think that we actually do have civil rights, human rights, liberty, and justice for all. No, we don't have those things. There are evil people controlling everything from the top. And if you will just allow yourself to accept that very unhappy truth, suddenly the world makes sense. You just cannot any longer say it's crazy. It's not crazy. It is absolutely as planned.
Thank you. I say that a lot on this podcast, and that survivors are the ones that we need to listen to. You all were the ones sitting in the rooms with these people. You all got to know the plans that they've been developing for thousands of years, and that they keep, you know, moving to the next generation and the next generation. You guys know the types of warfare that they're using, whether it's mind control slaves or electronic warfare, even UFOs potentially, who knows? Like, you guys are privy to stuff that the public isn't, but the people that we trust publicly, like politicians, lawyers, the talking heads on TV, the people that we're looking to for answers, are never going to give it to us because, like you said, they're blackmailed, they're programmed, they're controlled. They don't have any ability to be free to do or say anything that's truthful. Everything is a facade, and it's like the survivors of this system are the ones that society needs to shift and look to and say, hey, we have all these questions, we're trying to get them answered, the people aren't answering them that we're asking. Do you have answers? And all of you do. You're all a puzzle piece to what we're not told. And so I love that. You're so right about that. And slowly but surely, I feel like now people are starting to realize that. I have a smaller podcast, but it's grown exponentially in a very short period of time, just because I think people they're turning away from the TV and saying, what else? Like, where else can I get an answer? Because I've trusted the TV for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and it's not giving me an answer. Nobody's doing anything. Where else can I go? And so slowly but surely, people are starting to look at alternative ways to get news, and people are starting to say, oh, there's people that were around these systems that might know stuff that we don't, and we should go listen to them. And you're part of that. You pioneered this. You came out, I can't even imagine, over 10 years ago. That had to have been so confusing. Like, people didn't, MK Ultra, like, people might have heard of it, but satanic ritual abuse, all this stuff, like, was it still is considered crazy, but back then too, and you still did it. Like, so cool, Jean. That's amazing that you had the courage to do that.
But I stayed silent for a long time. I mean, I was silent about my UFO experiences for years because I associated it with so much shame and ridicule. I would not talk about it. And I am also compassionate for the people who don't want to accept it right now. Like, life is not easy.
No.
Life is really hard. People are not being paid well enough, and the family's falling apart. And because we're not paid enough, we don't have time enough for everything. And so for people to be told, well, the truth is this horrible, scary thing, I completely understand. I don't want to hear that. I want to believe in liberty and justice for all. I want to believe if I just work harder and I work my way up, life is going to be just like they show it on TV. I'll have it all under control, and I'll bring up my kids and they will inherit a nicer world. And they want to believe in the promises we've been given. And I'm sorry that I come with a message that's rather frightening. And yeah, it's sad. I'd rather believe in the fantasy that we've been. I grew up believing in democracy, and I think it's the one thing that kept me from seeing reality. The very simple civics classes we learned as children, that was part of our mind control, keeping us from seeing the reality of our world. And I understand why, especially when we got these little phones that we can pick up and just entertain us all day long. I'd rather entertain myself all day long than think about this stuff. So what I figure is that all of us who are speaking out and are telling our stories, most people will reject it. But the memory of having heard it once will be shoved away into some dark corner of their mind, and they will not think about it again if they're not forced to. But one day, when they need to know this, it'll pop back up, and it might help them understand, survive, figure out what's going on. But if there's somebody who's living a pretty happy life right now, they don't need to absorb this. They definitely don't want to. I have no need to try to force it on anybody. But you and I, we put the stuff out, and when people need to hear it, they will hear it. But until then, they will reject it because they're keeping life together. They're doing the best they can, and they don't need to terrify themselves. Just don't need to. And so I don't know where we're going to go as a culture. I really don't. I'm very curious, but I think that this is important for some people, and so I wrote my book and I post my videos for those few people who need it. And apologies for everybody else who gets their life upset if you don't need to know this yet. But
I think everybody needs to know it, because even if it doesn't affect somebody directly, like it's literally happening in every community. You know, it's happening in churches everywhere. It's happening at schools that people are sending their children to, you know. I think we do need to know about it. People just, because it doesn't directly affect them, they're like, "Oh, well, that's just too hard for me to listen to it." And it's like, imagine going through it, and imagine that there's kids still going through it. You think listening to it is hard? You think listening to it is hard, but somebody dealt with it for 16 years of their life, 20 years of their life, they're still dealing with it, being a targeted individual, and you know, like, but you can't just hear and learn about it, you know. It makes me so sad that people do that, because when we're blind to it, then we're basically consenting to it happening in our churches and the Freemason lodges down the street, you know, and at school field trips for the gifted and talented kids. Like, we're turning a blind eye to the fact that it's still happening. You know, I know it's hard to look at past events. Like, this stuff is very, very hard, you know, and not everybody has to go dive into specifics on satanic ritual abuse and like hear about all the details play by play, but to just know that this stuff exists, and that hundreds, thousands, millions of people have gone through it and are still going through it. You know, like it's really sad to me. I think people are really cowardice for turning away, especially when there's people like you, like being so vulnerable and sharing the hardest things of your life. You know, you're coming forth and sharing things that most people don't even ever tell their best friends, you know, in life, like the amount of vulnerability that a survivor comes forth and says, like, this is what I went through, you know, like it's not this pleasant stuff that most people in society go on podcasts to talk about, or usually it's like the best things in your life and, you know, all the money that you make and the successful business, you know. And it's very different to talk about these horrible things that you know, humanity has gone through and that children are still going through, you know. And so I think everybody needs to hear this. It's not convenient ever. And like I said, there's different levels. Not everybody needs to know all the gory details, but when we're turning a blind eye, it's still happening in our communities, whether or not we want to see it, you know. And the less we know, the more we just give ammo to the enemy to keep doing it, because they're like, oh, society doesn't, they're not going to do anything. They don't even want to watch a video. So we can just keep doing what we're doing and nobody's ever going to touch us. And so far it's worked. You know, their Luciferian kingdom is it's still running. You know, they're working overtime and we don't even want to look. We don't even want to hear a survivor talk, you know. And it's like, what a shame, you know. But you're right. The people that are ready for it, they're the ones learning it. They're empowering themselves. They know who the enemy is. They're studying, and hopefully they're sharing it with other people. So one by one, we are making an impact, you know, and starting to touch those people who don't want, you know, are so resistant to even looking at it.
And they're probably resistant because it triggers them in some way. They might be mind control subjects themselves who are resisting the most. And I want to also have faith in and acknowledge that each of us has an inner healer who knows when the time is right. It might be that one day is not the right day, but give us another week or another 10 years, whatever, the inner healer will know when that person can handle it, and then it'll come. And I think that that's what happened to me, that each of my flashbacks came when I was ready to get them and to not be completely traumatized by them. So when I had my kids living at home with me, I was oblivious. I had to get the kids as adults living on their own before I could start understanding what was going on with me. So each person has their own healing path, and it's not anyone's responsibility to try to force information on anybody else. And so we just have to be compassionate. This person who's totally resistant, it might not be their day to hear it. So have compassion and leave them to their oblivion if that's what's going to get them through the day with their kids, you know.
And even the people that reject it too, like it's still a seed planted. They might say, oh, that's crazy. But now they have heard of satanic ritual abuse. They've heard of MK Ultra. They've heard of mind control. They've heard of Project Paperclip. So even though they don't believe it, they can never forget it. Like it's still in their mind somewhere. It's something that
Mhm.
they can't say that they didn't know. And like you said, you never know when one day they'll wake up and be like, oh wait, this makes sense, or I'm gonna go back and research that thing that I didn't believe just for fun, and then they're like, oh wait, this is real. So you never like
Yeah,
the magnitude and impact of planting a seed cannot be understated either.
yeah. And so we just be patient and give everybody their own time and their own space. But in the meantime, I'm here doing my little thing and hoping that it helps somebody.
Oh, well, where can people find your book for people who might not be list or watching the video? Where can they find you online? Where's your book at? And how can people connect with you?
Okay, I've got a few websites. The book is rattlesnakefire.com. And like I said, there's a kind of a lousy PayPal page there, but it works. And I think I have an email address where if you write directly to me, I will sign it and mail it to you, old-fashioned ways. I think you can also go to lulu.com, has my book on it, and you can buy it directly from them, from the publisher. And then paradigmsalon.net is where I talk generally about mind control. And yeah, Paradigm Salon. And every now and then I go back and I look at everything I've gathered. It's like, I like this website. I like the things that I gathered together. The controllers were still allowing me to function. I had not been I, I had not been hit with directed energy weapons, at least not badly enough to stop me from doing this. Oh, and I don't know if I told you, I was remote control crashed on the highway back in 17 and I got a concussion. And the concussion has definitely affected me these last 6 years. I have found it harder. I don't read very much anymore. And I think that might be what's making it kind of hard for me to keep, to sit down and function and focus on a writing project. I'm just not doing it anymore. So I go back and I look at what I used to write, and I'm very pleased with this. I think it's still, even though it's 6 years old, it's still timely. Um, I have a jeaneisenhower.com website, which is basically my professional website. It has my life as a media consultant and an activist and an artist. That's all there. And but I got bold. Like, this used to have nothing about mind control on it. And you can see I put my book up there, nice and easy
Love
for people
it.
to find. All my other websites. That's something I just decided to do a couple years. I was trying to keep my professional life and all this other stuff completely separate. And one day I just decided, hell with it. I'm going to expose this on my professional site, and I added the other stuff in. I don't focus on it very much here, but I have links to go there. So those are my main three sites. And then on YouTube, I have Paradigm Salon Video, singular, not S. And that has a lot of my stuff, but I have a lot more than this. This is all that's available to the public right now, but there's like 4 times as much, and that I have recently made private because I don't know, something made me kind of embarrassed at the pathetic way I was communicating when I was early in this journey. And I should have had more compassion for myself, but I just decided that I didn't like them being seen without context. So I just took them off. My intention is to go over to my Paradigm Salon website and write a page that says, and here's all my pathetic videos of the first years of trying to figure things out, and just have link, 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 link. But I don't have that on there yet. But I hope to very soon. Anyway, that's where you can find things.
That's
And
amazing.
I'm pretty sure, and I think I have an email address on some of these, but it is Jean number 7 Eisenhower at gmail.com.
That's wonderful. I'm going to link all of this so people can go connect with you, and I'll put your email in the show notes too, so everybody can go find you. They can reach out to you if they want, and I would encourage anybody, if you think that you can help with some of the challenges that Jean mentioned with editing some of parts of her book and her website, please reach out. Those things go a really far way, especially if one of you on the other end has some type of a resource or who can do that fairly easily. That would be amazing if somebody could step in and help with the website and help get that little icon, the barcode thing on Jean's book, if you guys could help. So I'm going to just put that out there for
Thank
anyone
you.
that wants to help. And I'll have Jean's email below. And obviously she said it's on her websites too. So go visit her websites, get her book. That's so cool. You do sign copies too. So let's go,
Sure.
Jean, and go get her book also and keep it in your cherished collection of survivor books. It's always so good to go right to the source, you guys. We're so conditioned to give money all these different ways when we're grocery shopping, to give it to the food bank, and we don't even know if it's going there at the register,
Right.
to give to these nonprofits, and we have people who are trying to make a living and trying to get by speaking the truth, and if we can help fund that and create career paths for them to keep doing this, like that makes me excited, like people say sometimes, oh, this person's charging for the truth. And it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, but if you put all this time and effort into making a book, like we always buy our books. Why do we complain when like certain people buy books, but we'll go buy them from other people? Like I want you guys to make money off your books so you can keep talking and keep doing this. It's expensive doing all of this, whether it's time or resources that you're using. So you go, Jean, like you're amazing. And I'm so proud of you for everything that you've done. And I just wish you all the best. You are a phenomenal woman and you're changing lives, even if you don't realize it, even if people aren't reaching out, you're touching people. These are people that need you, and your voice, as more people wake up, like more and more people are going to keep finding you and keep, learning from you and transforming because you had the courage to step up and do it before other people did.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. I would like to encourage people also to buy the book because it's so well written. The way that I was trained in language as a child, there was another time where I realized that my father was training me to speak in as both my parents to speak in as few words possible, right to the point, shut up, be done. And so when I wrote this book, oh, and I also studied journalism. You don't want to waste anyone's time in journalism. So my book has been called Hemingway-esque. And if you read the blurbs that are on the Rattlesnake Fire website, you'll see a lot of very nice blurbs from doctors and psychologists and counselors. And Richard Dolan told me, he didn't write a blurb, but his wife did. Richard Dolan, big UFO guy. So I've known Richard, and he told me in person, it's a page turner. And it's also been called Hemingway-esque because I get right to the point and I do not waste your time with a bunch of any excess words. It is a dense book, and I appreciate that in my read. We're all so busy these days. We don't want to have someone take 10 minutes when it takes 5 minutes to tell a story. And so the book is dense, and I think people will appreciate that they get a lot of information for the time they spend reading.
Thank you so much for putting all that together. I know that, like I said, you hadn't done that before. You didn't even know where to start.
Mhm.
You did it. I think it's so cool. So thank you for everything that you put out for people like me, for survivors, and for, any other truth tellers or activists or warriors, just to learn from you. We need to come together and learn about these hard things, as hard as it is to hear, as hard as it is to read. Like this is the reality. And we're so lucky to have people like you that are willing to share with us.
And I am so grateful that you are making the space for people like me, for all of us, and getting it out there in a form that is accessible to so many people. So thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you too. This was an honor having you on. I'd love to have you back on again sometime. You're so sweet and you're so knowledgeable. I appreciate all the stories that you told and, helping us understand some of these really taboo topics and just asking some questions around it. So thank you so much, Jean.
I would love to come back. We'll do it again.
Well, everybody
Okay.
listening, I will have Jean's links in the show notes. Like I said, email her to thank her, to ask her questions. If you want to help her, like I said, with some of the projects that she's working on, like reach out, if you have some resources that can. It's always so nice whenever creators get to hear from people listening, even if it's just some words of encouragement. So go connect with her, follow her on YouTube. I'm going to link that below too. Her channel's awesome. Despite what she says, she might not think her videos are put together that great. There's a lot. I listen to almost every video. They're all filled with information, and she gets right to the point there too. They're not too long. So Go check out those videos. You're going to learn about targeted individuals. She has an awesome video that she put out, sort of her first video, which talks about MK Ultra and some of her experience in it. So go support her, you guys. Go on her websites, go check out her blog. She has tons of articles on there that she's written, lots of information, lots of links you can go click on, pictures, graphs, like all kinds of stuff that you can learn about this for free, you know, right at your own laptop or on your phone. So go check her out. I'll have all of our links too for the podcast below, you guys. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for all your support. God bless you, and we will see you next time.